I should have a list. Sorry, everybody who's coming in. I started this recording late, so we just started working through. We finished verses 37 to 46, and so I'm just gonna have to start from there. So I really apologize for that. All right, so that's probably one of the most important things here is that Joseph's dream of his own dream is really coming true now, right? All right, so let's go on. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly. And he gathered up all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from the fields around it. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. That language sounds familiar a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, the sands of God, I will make your people as numerous as.
Yeah.
Also, I think Joseph here is a kind of a fraudster like his father is.
How so?
Well, because they don't know how much grain they have, and he's selling it later.
Okay.
So he says there, like, here, I sold 50 bushels of grain. Here's a month, and he actually sold 3,000 bushels of grain, and nobody, you don't know how much you got.
Yeah. Okay. We'll hold on to that because when we get there, we'll have to hold on to that. Yeah. But this language, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure, for it could not be measured. That sounds like the promise to Abraham, right? Yeah. Before the year of the famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come. Let's look at these names of these kids first. What do you think about this? The one's called Forgetful, and one is called Fruitful. Manasseh is, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house.
And the 7 years of plenteous for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt ended. That's right. And the 7 years and the 7 years of Egypt were ended.
Ellie, what do you think about that? God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction, is what that name Ephraim means. God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. I'm
not quite sure.
Well, this commentary is kind of cool. It's in the book of Joel, there's an image from the prophet where the Lord had fulfilled his promise to restore you to the years that the swarming locust has eaten. So in Joseph's personal situation, the thin cows of affliction had been consumed by the fat cows of God's providence. That was Pharaoh's dream. So this commentary speaks to this as a redemption. The marks of the wounds remained in his life and could never be forgotten. So his one son is called Manasseh. So the wounds can't be forgotten, but those scars have been incorporated beautifully into the intricate pattern of God's grace in his life. And Joseph was determined not to forget that. So even though he named his son for something that would make you think that he was trying to forget all the bad, if you name your son, I'm going to forget all the bad, that's still a reminder that there was bad. Right? And then for the other son, he's speaking to the marks of the wounds. So let's see, you don't simply forget an experience that's life-changing. You can't. These scars will mark you indelibly for the rest of your life. Yet what God does by his grace is to take those ugly wounds and reshape them into a beautiful part of the tapestry of person and a purpose and blessing that he is weaving in your life. He can overwhelm painful memories of your past with the wonderful memory of his greater faithfulness and grace to you in the midst of all your pain, and with the assurance that he will bring blessing out of your worst suffering.
Somehow I'm reminded of Jesus' scars.
Thank you. Somehow I'm reminded of Jesus' scars, she says. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Jesus' scars. It's interesting. There's a town in Virginia called this.
Yes, there is. Yeah, my brother lives right by there. He lives in Fredericksburg.
But I could see that as Joseph, when he was going through this hard spot in his life, was probably praying to God. Take this away from me, is there something better in my life? And it took how many years before God answered his prayers?
Yeah.
And so this was an answer, could be an answer to Joseph's prayers for a different type of life.
Well, and at the same time, God was still working with Joseph during his suffering.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, he was working all that time. He was working through his suffering.
And God is still working on our lives.
Still, absolutely, Allie, absolutely. Yeah, I've been looking at this a lot lately. In the classes that I'm taking one systematic theology class where we're looking at the Trinity, and I'm taking another class that's the Lutheran Confession. So I'm just like geeking out on theology right now, and looking at suffering as a place of presence. That we know in the theology of the cross that God's glory is revealed on the cross, right? It's revealed at that moment that Jesus is suffering the most. That's his throne. And so we have the promise that God is present in suffering. He's not only present, he's revealed in suffering. And so in our own lives, when, I think about myself with what's going on with my breathing or family, or, I'm walking with some people right now that are, going through some hardships. And for me as a caregiver, it might not necessarily be comforting to somebody who's lying in bed saying, I can see God in your suffering. I don't know if that's comforting to them or not, but it's comforting to me as a caregiver, as somebody who's walking through them, to have that reassurance that God is there. So there's sort of two parts to that, right? There's the part that is the companionship, that we know Jesus is there because we have the promise that he's in suffering. So we have the companionship that he's walking through us with this, but also we have this amazing promise that this is you're looking at the face of God. When you look at somebody in bed, you're looking at the face of God, really, you know, if you think about it that way. And I think that's pretty amazing. Yeah.
It's interesting when you look at God deciding to have his son come down and be crucified. You know, why? And yet, after thousands of years since then, and the results that has had on humanity, it's amazing.
It is an amazing choice.
How people have responded to that act of grace that God has provided us.
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I've been just thinking about is not only was this what God did, but just that God, when you think about, especially during the time, the pantheon of, you know, the Egyptian gods and the Babylonian gods, and, you know, we know that they're not real, but this idea of a God that would be willing to empty God's self to do that for us, rather than all these gods that want, you know, all this frivolous adoration and sacrifice and stuff like that. It was our God that made the sacrifice.
All of that stuff made up by people.
Pardon me?
All the other gods, that stuff was all made up by people.
Yeah, it was all made up. But their methodology was to be served rather than to serve. You know, that's the thing that sets our God apart, is that he's a self-sacrificing God. Yeah, it blows me away. So this book that I'm reading from, it's called The Gospel According to Joseph. It's kind of a cool book. There's this whole series. It's the Gospel according to different people in the Old Testament. And he's saying that, you know, these scars or this pain that Joseph has, or that we all have, we can reshape these memories. The name that Joseph gives to his second son, Ephraim, is a clue. Joseph explains, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. God doesn't necessarily promise to deliver us out of the land of our affliction, although that is what we want and usually what we pray for. I'm sure Joseph prayed repeatedly to be taken out of the pit and restored to his family in Canaan. Instead, God's purpose for Joseph to be fruitful took shape precisely in the land of affliction in Egypt, where God used him to be a blessing to those around him, ultimately saving many from famine and death.
I wonder if in naming his sons, one being to forget, which doesn't mean that he doesn't remember, just means that it's not weighing on him like it did before. And then the blessing of having the second, in which he said he made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. I'm wondering if in our own lives, when we have been in hardship and then receive relief or blessing from it, whether we have the perspective of looking back and seeing that through this whole time of hardship, God was leading us, which he was. Obviously, we see it in Joseph's life. I mean, with the dreams and the interpretation and all of this stuff that we see, he's actually being reminded of how God was. I don't think it says that exactly here, but the way I'm seeing it, he's being reminded of how much God was. He may have had that perspective, but he's also realizing how much more God was with him than he actually realized at the time.
Yeah, did everybody hear that? No. This is I think a really beautiful point, and it speaks to me personally too. So if I can just paraphrase, if I don't get it right, correct me, but he's saying that God was with Joseph through this whole time, working his good, and Joseph may or may not have even realized that it was happening, but it was happening anyway. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you know, and he may have realized it, but maybe did not have the perspective of what the future might be.
Yeah.
And then as the future materializes, he's looking back and saying, whoa, look at what he's.
So in hindsight, he's able to look back and see.
God was even greater involved in my life than I thought he was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Doesn't that happen to a lot of us though?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I can tell you in my personal experience, if you can indulge me for a second, I grew up in the church, I grew up Lutheran, I was confirmed, and I promptly stopped going as soon as I didn't have to anymore, as soon as I was out of my parents' house, right? And honestly, I didn't go really until I married Scott, because he went to church. And Scott's actually the one that kind of brought me back to church. And then coming here was what hooked me, and so I went to church sort of out of loyalty to Scott. And nice. Then
that was nice.
It was nice, yeah. My cute boyfriend went to church, so I went with him. And then but coming here and the word, actually hearing the word, it's a testimony that the word works, it works. But a lot of bad things happened to me after I stopped going to church. A lot of good things happened too. But one of them was a divorce. I had a really painful divorce. And I went through it by myself because I didn't ask God with you. I didn't ask God to help me, or I did, and I didn't feel like he was, how you just kind of call out in your loneliness, God help me. But how else was I involved in trying to
take the direction he was giving you?
Yeah, how was I setting myself up to listen or to see how it was blessing me? But in hindsight, I can see all of the good things that came from it. So all things work together for good.
For those who love God. For
those who love God, and also for those who don't realize they love God. But I was baptized. I think there's a lot to that. I think God just never let me go. So that's true. Yeah, thank you. Does anybody else have, if you would share, does anybody else have an experience like that? Or maybe you were in a period of that time that you felt like you were going it alone, but in hindsight, you can see that you weren't.
Well, God has never let me go. Even when I was a small child.
Never let you go. That's right. I'm so glad to hear that. That is such good news right there. Well, somebody mentioned Jesus. I think it was you, Linda. And this commentary says, it is striking that Jesus' resurrected and glorified body still bears the scars of his suffering. There are
even when I had a brain tumor.
Yeah.
He saw me all the way through it.
All the way through it. Yeah, there's some real suffering there for sure. But you could feel it with you.
Did you feel God with you during that time?
Yes.
Or during that time and looking back on it alone.
Exactly.
That's amazing, Allie. Allie was saying that during her time of sickness, when she had a brain tumor, she could feel God with.
He saw me through everything.
Everything, yeah. And he's brought you here to us.
All my sickness.
That was true with my brother. I talked about who had cerebral palsy too. He had a wonderful relationship with Jesus and God was with him through his total disability too, and also blessed my family through it.
Yeah,
because they helped get what we now know as IDEA, and God worked through that situation, and my parents could have been mad at God that they had birth to a child with cerebral palsy, but no, that made them stronger.
Yeah. So Linda was saying that she had a brother with cerebral palsy, and that not only he could feel God with him, but her whole family could during that.
Absolutely.
And feel the blessings.
Absolutely. He was baptized. He was confirmed in communion in our church. Gethsemane Lutheran Church gave him rooms upstairs Seattle Public Schools wouldn't allow them to have a school at that time. So they rented a room at the Gethsemane Lutheran Church and hired their own teachers and everything.
Well, the church provided a room where they could homeschool them, and because of what the schooling wasn't available.
Well, they refused to teach.
They refused to do it, yeah.
He even sent me to special schools.
He did, and so you had those things available.
I could learn how to. So I could learn how to meditate on my special needs.
Yeah. Well, and you have the gift of your companion here too.
And my physical needs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. So
and my physical therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're seeing that as a gift.
So I could learn how to raise my legs and raise my arms.
And be here with us today to share your faith.
And she's right. I'm here today to share my faith with you people.
Thank you.
He gave me a second life.
Thank you. You bless us in here, Ali, definitely.
That is true.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is most certainly.
This is most certainly true.
For God, I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so this is an interesting question about Jesus, you know, that he still bears the marks in his body of his suffering. Why didn't the Father heal those wounds at the resurrection so that Jesus' restored body could be unscarred? And this author says it's because these scars that speak to painful sacrifice are made beautiful by the fruit that they bear for God's redemptive purposes. Jesus will never forget the cross and his profound suffering at the hand of his brothers, but neither will he forget the fruit born of that suffering, a new family of people from every tribe and nation who now receive new life at his hands. God made a terrible affliction bear incredible fruit, and those indelible scars now speak permanently of indelible grace.
Thomas had to have something to stick his finger.
Thomas had to have, I knew that you were going to go somewhere. But, you know, the cross that's in our sanctuary is so beautiful, but it has a crown of thorns on it. You know, we don't forget that. And the crucifix that's on the crucifer that goes, is that called a crucifer?
The procession stuff.
The processional cross, that's got the wounds. You know,
yeah, one side has the crown and the other side is the cross.
Yeah, one side has the crown and the other side has the crucified body. Yeah,
risen Christ.
Yeah,
we're the ones who designed that cross. And we did.
Can you speak to that, Joyce?
Oh,
that's a cool story.
I didn't know you heard me. When we were building the church, we had a committee, an interiors committee, and we decided to have, well, I can't think of his name right now, anyway, he built the cross, and we designed it with the crown of thorns around it. So that's a very special thing to us.
Yeah.
And I used to climb on the ladder and put the white scarf and the black scarf and the purple scarf on there. But I don't do that. The what?
The wounds, some of them showed one side showed something different.
No. They were talking about the processional cross,
yeah,
that has Jesus on it. That's not ours. The wooden cross with the crown of thorns on it.
is the one that was
the one that
designed.
we designed.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. We were very involved.
Yeah,
I can
Thank you.
remember Joyce Werner and Herb down on their hands and knees scraping alongside the baseboards out in the north end. I mean, we were involved.
yeah, amazing.
And it's a
Thank you. So
wonder.
now we can all enjoy this beautiful church
Yeah.
because you were on your hands and knees.
We were,
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing.
What year was that? I'm trying to remember.
What year did you?
When we were.
Late 80s.
Church.
Remember?
What year was that?
Well, it's on the front of the church, I can tell you that.
90, 91, 92.
Oh,
90.
Yeah.
I just don't-
I think you did.
When was this church built?
1990. 1990 is what the
91.
the class says. I know.
Well, there you go.
Exactly.
I don't even.
Yeah.
91.
They named it our present church.
What?
The name is our present church.
Is that on the stationery?
It's not SLC, it's Olds.
Our present church.
Ken Lundemo.
Wonderful.
Ken Lundemo was the designer of the cross or he built it. And the two sconces in the north end, he built those. He's
Okay.
a great artist.
From Paulsville or
No, in Silverdale.
in Silverdale?
Well, he lives way out,
So-
past the airport.
Oh,
Way out there.
All right. Well, so the 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end. And the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph has said. There was famine in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he says to do, you do.
I don't know that.
So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. So where is it that he said that he...
Well, if they don't know how much they have,
You could have cheated.
you can cheat when you're selling.
Oh, okay. So we didn't see the description if he was cheating. Yeah.
But he is.
But that shows too that Joseph's interpretation of Pharaoh's dream was true, and that what God said he would do, he did.
Yeah. And it worked. Yeah.
And Joseph was 44 years old now. Yeah, he was 130 when he died.
So when anything else, I'm not sure what else to say about this part. We kind of
Yeah, but there were 2 7-year-olds, 2 7 family, and
He's selling the grain back to the individual. Back to gave it to him and built the storage facilities.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So they had paid it as a tax, and now they're having to buy it back. So it's like a double tax.
Oh,
Okay. I see where you're going now.
But I mean, he has to do something with the money. I mean, he has to account to somebody for the money.
Right.
That person's going to be Pharaoh.
Yeah.
And Pharaoh says, how much grain did you sell? And where's the money for it? And Joseph says, I sold 50 bushels. Here's the money. When he sold 6,000 bushels, the rest of that money goes into the pot. And there's no way to account for that. I mean, there's no way to check it. There are no internal controls.
No internal controls. You sound like Scott Grassmick.
Well, God was in.
God was in. Yeah, that's right.
And he probably kept the storehouses full too.
So when Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" I think this is funny. "Why are you sitting down looking at one another?"
Because they didn't want to go to Egypt.
And he said, "Behold, I've heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So why did he hold back Benjamin of all the others?
Didn't want to lose him.
No.
Yeah, but what was special about Benjamin?
He
was his full brother instead of his half brother.
Yeah.
Right? Because Rachel had 2 children, right? Yeah.
I wonder if Joseph had.
Hang on just a second.
Rachel died when Benjamin.
Rachel died when Benjamin was born. That's right.
I wonder if Jacob may have had any idea that maybe the other brothers may have had something to do with the death.
I think he's getting a little bit suspicious at this point. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is just, I mean, it's just, yeah, typical of how you're like, get off your rear and go. Yeah. In fact, the commentary is funny. In the 20 years after the brothers sold Joseph, things did not become any better at home. The chapter opens with Jacob barking at his sons, "Go get some food, you lazy good-for-nothings." The men who were so ingenious in ridding themselves of their despised younger brother had no plan to save their families from slowly wasting away from the famine. But for his part, Jacob was still playing favorites, keeping Joseph's only full brother, Benjamin, back while the others went to Egypt because he feared that harm might come to him.
Well, and Benjamin, we don't exactly know how old he is, or do we? Somewhere, Joseph is 37 plus years old at this point, and we don't know how much younger Benjamin was and how much older the other brothers were. There may be quite an age discrepancy. I don't know what difference that makes.
Yeah, I think Judah was oldest, right? I think he's like a lot older.
He's 44.
44.
Yeah, Joseph.
He inherited.
Well, yeah. But this is sometime during isn't this during the 7 years of famine, or is it after?
This is during, because they're going to get ready to go down and get food.
The Pharaoh service, right?
Yeah.
They've got 14 years in there.
Yeah, except that they haven't been through all of it.
Yeah, it's the start of this.
He's probably running on.
Yeah. So Benjamin's probably, I mean, he's got to be an adult.
Yeah, by now.
I would think. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that, yes, the brothers are looking at one another. Okay. So you can, of course, easily imagine that they're wondering if they would end up finding out what happened to Joseph in Egypt. But could they even have possibly known about, because if Joseph was second in command in Egypt, that news might travel around the world.
But would his name Joseph have been known, or the new name? That was probably maybe another
Just making me wonder.
Another little subterfuge that
Wouldn't they have thought that he was dead? They left him in the.
Yeah.
Well, they stole him.
Yeah, I hope you know. Yeah. The others thought he was an owner. Did they not?
Yeah.
yeah, either dead or a slave. Yeah. But the name that's being, you know, you're right, the second in command of Egypt is going to be a famous guy.
CNN would have it on.
CNN would have had it all over the place. And if it were a good reporter, they would have known that his original name was Joseph, but I don't know. Yeah, interesting. Interesting.
I think looking at one another might be an idiom.
Well,
or an action.
Yeah, but that says his son, not his brothers. When Jacob learned there was rain in Egypt, he said to his sons, Joseph's brothers, why do you keep looking at each other?
Yeah.
Not his brothers. Yeah. Who is Joseph's brothers? These are Joseph's sons.
Jacob's sons.
Jacob's sons. Yeah, Jacob's sons. They're Joseph's brothers. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Hebrew, Paul the Hebrew just says to look. So the writers have said, why do you look at one another?
Oh, well.
It just says to look.
A number of things like, oh, for us, we don't have anything to eat. Well, do something about it.
Do something about it. Get a job.
Yeah.
It's interesting, this discussion that's going on. There's an interpreter.
Are you looking for something?
What the brothers don't know is that Joseph doesn't understand everything they're saying. So they're talking, and he knows what they're saying. They don't know that because everything's going back and forth.
Yeah, when they get there, we'll see that, right? Yeah.
Salvation Army has some food today, but it's not here. We serve on Wednesday, every Wednesday. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you know what? We've got those, and excuse me.
Want to go to my
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Wait just a second. We've got some over there.
We have something for you.
You know, we have to be
There's some stuff on you.
Yeah.
You can sit in there. Come join us.
Okay, anybody here, Lisa has a little bit of soup left out here. Nobody wanted
So we had a visitor. Yeah, for a second. Let's go ahead and keep going. We love this. Yes. Okay, actually, you guys, it's 1:45 anyway, so maybe this is a good time to wrap up. So we've got where we're ending up here is Benjamin was his full brother, so that's why Jacob's probably holding him back, right? Yeah. So let's go ahead and end here since it's 1:45. Thank you for this. This was a great discussion today. So where we're going to pick up next time is that Joseph is going to meet his brothers. Okay. All right. Go in peace and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God. All right. Everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Kim. Thank you very much. You did a great job.
Thank you.